Barcelona hides a story that defies time, the story of a young girl who at only 13 confronted the world's most powerful empire with nothing more than her faith. What drove Saint Eulalia to defy Rome? How could she endure 13 torments without renouncing her beliefs? And why, centuries later, does her name still live on in the memory of Barcelona? Her martyrdom was brutal, but her legacy became eternal. This is the story of the girl who never gave up. Chapter 1. A Barcelona oppressed by Rome. In the vast expanse of the Roman Empire, few cities shone as brightly as Barcino, the future Barcelona. However, in the 3rd century AD, that light was tinged with shadows. Governed with an iron hand by the most powerful empire in history, the city lived under a tense calm, a peace imposed by fear. Emperor Diocletian, obsessed with restoring Rome's greatness and quelling any dissent, had declared war on an emerging faith, Christianity. For the followers of that belief, the world had become a dangerous place, and little Barcino was no exception. The city's streets were filled with merchants, soldiers, and citizens who accepted the imposition of the imperial cult without question. On every corner, temples dedicated to Jupiter, Mars, and Apollo reminded everyone that the Roman faith was the only one permitted. Yet amid whispers and clandestine meetings, a group of believers clung to a different truth: faith in Christ, a forbidden faith, one that cost lives. At that time, imperial laws required all citizens to make sacrifices in honor of the gods of the empire and the emperor himself, a gesture that was not only an act of devotion but also a proof of loyalty to Rome. To refuse was to commit treason, and treason was paid for in blood. In AD 303, Diocletian issued the edict that would seal the fate of thousands, the systematic persecution of Christians. Churches were set on fire, sacred writings destroyed, and those who refused to renounce their faith were brutally punished. In Barcino, the shadow of persecution fell especially hard. Governor Dacian, an unyielding man loyal to the emperor, became the executioner of those who defied the imperial decree. Under his rule, Christians were mercilessly persecuted, arrested en masse, and subjected to unimaginable torments. But among all the persecuted, among the names etched in the echo of suffering, a young girl of only 13 was about to defy the power of Rome. She was not of noble birth, had no armies nor riches, yet she possessed something that neither fire nor the sword could break: an unyielding faith. Saint Eulalia did not yet know that her destiny was written in pain and glory, but the story of her sacrifice was taking shape in the streets of a city that would soon witness one of the most atrocious martyrdoms of antiquity. Chapter 2. A Girl with Unyielding Faith. Amid the oppression that suffocated the Christians of Barcino, in a humble house on the outskirts of the city, Eulalia was born. From an early age, her spirit set her apart from the other children. While others played in the streets of the Roman colony, she spent hours in prayer, captivated by the stories of the prophets and the teachings of Christ. It was not mere childish curiosity. In her heart burned a devotion that seemed far too intense for her tender age. Her family, deeply Christian, tried to protect her from the hostility surrounding them. But Eulalia was unafraid. To her, faith was stronger than any threat. By the age of 12, she was already recognized among her kin for her courage and the purity of her spirit. She could not stand injustice, and, although just a child, she spoke with a confidence that surprised even the adults. She saw how Roman soldiers stormed the homes of Christians, how her neighbors vanished never to be seen again, how fear seeped into every corner of Barcino. Yet within her, something urged that she could not remain silent. She could not hide her faith when others were dying for it. Her parents, fearful of the growing danger, tried to keep her away from trouble. They knew that Dacian, the cruel governor of the province, was determined to eradicate Christianity from the city, and that even a gesture of rebellion could cost her life. "Eulalia, my daughter, you must be cautious," her mother warned. "The Lord hears our prayers in silence." But Eulalia did not want to conceal her faith in darkness. For her, confessing Christ was not an option, it was a duty. One day, while walking through the market, she witnessed something that would mark her destiny. A group of soldiers was dragging an elderly Christian man, beating him and spitting on him as they led him before the Roman authorities. The crowd watched in silence, too afraid to intervene, but in Eulalia's eyes burned the fire of indignation. "He is not a criminal, he is a man of God," she cried out with the innocent boldness of one who knows no fear. The soldiers turned toward her, but before they could harm her, her mother quickly pulled her aside and led her back home. "You cannot speak like that, Eulalia," her mother said, her heart heavy. "They will kill us all." But in the girl's soul, there was no turning back. She knew that her faith was her life, and nothing and no one would make her renounce it. That night, while the city slept, Eulalia made a decision that would change her destiny forever. If the Christians were being persecuted for proclaiming the truth, then she herself would go before the authorities to proclaim her faith. She was 13 years old, and her path to martyrdom was about to begin. Chapter 3. The Escape and the Decision to Face Destiny. Diocletian's edict was not merely a decree, but a death sentence for thousands of Christians throughout the empire. Yet in Barcelona, the persecution was not felt as a distant order issued from Rome. It was experienced on every street, in every home, where a Christian family feared the arrival of soldiers. Governor Dacian, notorious for his cruelty, carried out the imperial orders with relentless zeal. Those who refused to renounce their faith were branded, humiliated, and thrown into prison. But for many, prison was only the beginning of a path of unending suffering. Each dawn brought new arrests. It was said that the Romans kept lists of suspected names, and that a single anonymous denunciation could cause someone to vanish. Some tried to escape, fleeing to the countryside or hiding in makeshift catacombs beneath the city. Others, however, chose to remain and face their fate, convinced that death was not an end, but the beginning of eternal glory. It was in this climate of mounting terror that young Eulalia made her decision. The girl had heard the accounts of the tortures inflicted upon the followers of Christ. She knew of the lashings, the burning irons, and the ravenous beasts in the amphitheaters. She knew that confessing her faith before Dacian meant signing her death sentence. Yet her spirit did not waver. While others sought ways to hide, she sought a way to be heard. Under cover of night, she quietly left her home. Her parents slept, unaware of the unwavering determination of their daughter. Barefoot, her feet touched the cold stones of the road as she moved through a city engulfed in shadows. The moon illuminated her fragile figure, but her heart beat with the strength of an army. She had no weapons, no shield, only her faith, and she was ready to defend it until the end. At the first light of dawn, Eulalia was found standing before the governor's residence. There, guarded by watchful and weary soldiers, was the entrance to Roman power in the province. Without hesitation, the girl raised her voice. "I am a Christian, and I come to proclaim my faith. I renounce the false gods of Rome, for there is only one true God, and his Son is Christ." Her words echoed in the cold morning like thunder. The guards exchanged incredulous looks. A girl, alone and unafraid, defying the most powerful empire in the world. But Rome had no mercy. Within seconds, the cruel hands of the soldiers closed around her, dragging her inside the palace. Her fate was sealed. The martyrdom of Saint Eulalia had just begun. Chapter 4. The Encounter with Dacian. The doors of the tribunal slammed shut with a resounding crash, confining Eulalia in the heart of Roman power in Barcelona. Before her, seated on a carved marble chair, was the man who embodied the terror of the Christians, Dacian, the governor of the province. His purple tunic shone under the light of torches, and his eyes, cold as steel, fixed on the figure of the girl whom the soldiers had dragged before him. Silence fell over the room. It was not every day that a 13-year-old girl appeared voluntarily before the most feared executioner of the Christians. A man of his station was accustomed to supplications, tears, and feigned repentance from those seeking to save their lives. But Eulalia did not seem like a prisoner. She stood upright, her chin held high, her gaze alight with a flame that the governor could not comprehend. Dacian leaned forward, studying her as if she were an exotic rarity. With a firm, yet mocking tone, he said, "Tell me, child, do you know who I am?" "I know very well who you are," Eulalia replied without hesitation. "You are a man who believes he holds power over life and death, but only God holds that power." A murmur ran through the room. The soldiers exchanged incredulous glances. How dare she? No one had ever spoken to Dacian in such a manner and lived to tell the tale. Yet the governor did not rush to punish her. Deep within, something about this small creature who showed no fear fascinated him. "You speak dangerous words for someone so young. Have they not taught you to respect the laws of Rome?" Eulalia stepped forward, meeting his gaze with the conviction of one who has transcended fear. "The laws of Rome are the laws of men. I cannot obey them when they demand that I renounce God." Dacian's face darkened. Patience was a luxury he rarely allowed himself. His tone hardened. "You are just a child. I do not wish to punish you. If you renounce that superstition and pay homage to the gods of the empire, I will let you go." At the mere mention of that idea, Eulalia spat on the ground. "The gods of Rome are false. I will not kneel before stone idols." Her words, spoken with such defiance, left the entire room holding its breath. For a moment, Dacian was silent. Then, a low and dangerous laugh escaped from his throat. "You have the courage of a soldier," he said, "but the stubbornness of a fool. Very well, if this is how you wish it to end, we shall see if your God can save you from the punishment you deserve." With a simple gesture of his hand, he ordered the soldiers to take her to prison. His final words echoed like a death sentence. "Tomorrow, we shall see how much faith remains when you feel the pain." Eulalia did not lower her head. She did not cry. She did not beg. As they dragged her out of the room, her lips uttered one final prayer in a soft voice. She knew her suffering was about to begin, yet she also knew that her spirit would never yield. Chapter 5. The First Torment. The Whips of Fire. The cell was cold and damp. The air reeked of dried blood and despair. Eulalia spent the night in complete darkness, her wrists bound and her body numb from the hard stone floor. She did not fear death, but she did fear pain, for her body was as mortal as any other's, yet in her mind there was no doubt or regret. Her martyrdom was the price of her faith, and she was willing to pay it. At dawn, the soldiers burst into the cell and dragged her once again before Dacian. This time, there were no more warnings or promises of pardon. The governor had already decided her fate. With a cruel smile, he explained what was about to happen. "You claim that your God is stronger than Rome. Let us see if he remains with you when pain becomes your only companion." In the castle square, where executions and punishments were carried out to serve as a warning to the people, Eulalia was tied to a wooden pillar. The ropes cut into her wrists, but that was only the beginning. Before her, 2 soldiers held long whips with iron tips heated by fire. This was not a mere flogging. Each lash would tear her skin like incandescent claws. The crowd murmured in horror and fascination. How could such a powerful empire fear a girl enough to subject her to such a punishment? Some averted their eyes, unable to bear what was about to happen, while others silently prayed that God would give her strength. The first lash fell with a sharp, cruel sound. An unbearable burning sensation spread across her back and throughout her body, yet Eulalia did not cry out. Her jaw tightened, her breathing grew heavy, but not a single complaint escaped her lips. Another lash, and another. Her skin was torn open, blood gushed forth, and her clothes became stained with red. The executioners, surprised by her resilience, redoubled their force. A lash to her legs made her stagger, another to her arms left her breathless. With each strike, her small body trembled, yet her eyes, still filled with determination, remained fixed on the sky. When her back was finally nothing more than a mass of wounded flesh, the soldiers paused, panting. They expected her to be unconscious, broken by the suffering. But there she was, standing, supporting herself with her last remaining strength, murmuring a prayer. Dacian rose from his seat, irritated. This was not the spectacle he had expected. His tortures usually elicited screams, pleas, and capitulation. But this girl was unlike the others. Her faith held her firm, and that enraged the governor more than any insult. "If you think this is all foolish, child," he said coldly, "we have only just begun." The soldiers released her, letting her fall to the ground like a broken doll. Her wounds burned like embers, yet she could still move. With the little strength that remained, she raised her head and looked at the governor. "You can destroy my body, but my soul remains free." Dacian clenched his fists. He could not stand to see her defy him, even in pain. If the whips of fire were not enough, then even worse, torments would follow. Saint Eulalia's martyrdom had only just begun. Chapter 6. The 13 Torments, the Price of Faith. Eulalia lay on the stone floor, her small body marked by relentless punishment. Her skin, once pure white, now blended with the dried blood soaking her garments. Yet even in the face of such brutality, her soul remained unyielding. She neither screamed nor pleaded, nor did she give in. She merely closed her eyes and murmured prayers, as if each lash brought her one step closer to God. Dacian, seated on his marble throne, watched her with a mix of irritation and disbelief. How could a mere girl endure so much suffering without breaking? No adult, no warrior, no one who had ever been condemned had ever resisted like this. Eulalia's silence was not weakness, it was defiance, and that infuriated the governor more than any insult. The young martyr knew that this was not to be the end. According to Christian tradition, Saint Eulalia endured 13 torments before her final breath, each symbolizing her 13 years of life. Records from that time are scarce and imprecise, but the accounts passed down through the centuries speak of unimaginable torments for a young girl. It is not known for certain what all the torments were, but tradition mentions lashings with fire, iron hooks that tore her flesh, deep cuts, burning embers, and other tests of extreme suffering. The soldiers looked to Dacian, awaiting orders. With a slow gesture, the governor raised his hand and pronounced the words that sealed the girl's fate. "Let the people see the price of disobedience. Continue." The executioners advanced once more. The crowd watched in silence, some horrified, others indifferent. Many knew that a single look of compassion could condemn them as well. Yet even so, some hidden Christians lowered their heads and whispered prayers. Eulalia was not alone. They lifted her up. Her strength was waning, yet her faith remained intact. Her eyes grew heavy, the pain seared her skin, but her heart continued to beat steadfastly. She knew that every blow was just another step toward her true home, the kingdom of God. Dacian wanted to see fear in her eyes. He wanted to hear her lament, but Eulalia simply raised her gaze toward him and smiled, a fragile smile, yet full of light. And in that moment, even the cruelest governor of Rome felt a shiver run down his spine. But more torments were yet to come. The next would be the cruelest of all, the barrel of blades. Chapter 7. The Barrel of Blades, the cruelest torment. Eulalia's body was broken, yet her spirit remained intact. Every torture inflicted upon her had failed to draw forth a single cry of despair, a plea or a sign of surrender. Her resilience had turned her martyrdom into a terrifying spectacle for those present. How could a 13-year-old girl endure so much without breaking? Dacian, consumed by rage and the humiliation of having failed to break the little Christian, decided it was time for a punishment that would forever mark the memory of the inhabitants of Barcelona. It was not enough merely to wound her. Her suffering had to be made an example. It was then that he ordered the most cruel torment of all, the barrel of blades. The executioners brought forth a large wooden barrel, reinforced with nails and fitted inside with sharp blades. The idea was simple and brutal: to place Eulalia inside, seal it shut, and roll it down the steep streets of the city. With every rotation, the blades would dig into her skin, slowly tearing apart her flesh. There would be no escape, no place where she could rest without feeling the sharp edge pierce her flesh. The crowd fell silent. Many could no longer watch. Even some of the soldiers averted their eyes, disturbed by the brutality of the punishment. But Eulalia showed no fear. Her legs trembled from blood loss, her wounds burned like living embers, yet her faith was her strength. When they prepared her to be placed in the barrel, she lifted her eyes to the sky and whispered one final prayer: "Lord, I commend my spirit into your hands." The barrel was pushed down the slope, rolling along one of the steepest streets of the city. The girl inside was tossed from side to side, her body being pierced time and again by the blades. The sound of wood striking stone mingled with the horrified murmurs of the onlookers. Yet even in the midst of that unimaginable agony, not a single cry escaped her lips. Today, centuries later, that street still exists in Barcelona and is known as the Bajada de Santa Eulalia, the descent of Saint Eulalia. It is a silent reminder of the martyr's sacrifice, a place where history and faith still echo in the memory of the city. Every year, on her feast day, Barcelona commemorates her martyrdom with processions and tributes, keeping alive the story of the girl who defied the Roman Empire with her unyielding faith. When the barrel finally came to a stop at the bottom of the slope, the soldiers approached expecting to find an inert body, but Eulalia was still breathing. Her eyes remained open, her lips barely moving as she whispered prayers. The surprise was complete. Dacian could not allow this sight to strengthen the faith of the Christians. He could not let the city see a girl defy Rome's power with her resistance. Only one final punishment remained. The governor stood and gave his final order. The crowd held its breath. Eulalia's end was near. Chapter 8. The crucifixion in the form of an X and the miracle of the snow. The sun began to set over Barcelona, tinting the sky a burning red, as if nature itself reflected Eulalia's suffering. Her body, shattered by the torches, could barely remain upright, yet her spirit remained unyielding. The girl who had defied the governor, who had endured the whips, the iron hooks, and the torment of the barrel of blades, remained silent, her gaze fixed on the sky as she surrendered her fate to God. Dacian applauded with disdain. His patience had run out, but Eulalia's resistance could not be rewarded with a swift death. Decapitating a girl was far too simple an execution, and he wanted her suffering to serve as a visible lesson to all the Christians in the city. Then, with a cold smile on his lips, he pronounced his final decision. She will not die in one blow. She shall be crucified in the form of an X, so that all Christians may see what becomes of those who defy Rome. The soldiers hesitated for a moment. Crucifixions were common, but they were reserved for adult criminals, rebels, and slaves. Never for a 13-year-old girl. But an order from Dacian could not be questioned. Without delay, the executioners erected a cross in the shape of an X, an even crueler method than the traditional vertical cross. In that position, the body was suspended in an irregular manner, forcing the limbs to bear an extreme weight, intensifying the pain and making it even more difficult to breathe. Eulalia was stripped of her blood-stained garments. Her arms were stretched and tied to the wooden beams, while her feet were fixed in place. The pain throbbed through her already exhausted muscles, yet she remained resolute. Her last reserves of strength were not to be wasted in lamentation, but in prayer. The crowd watched in silence, horrified. Many had witnessed executions before, but never something so cruel. Not a girl. Not someone who, even on the brink of death, still displayed a divine serenity. A soldier murmured in one final act of compassion, "Renounce your faith, and we will take you down from there." But Eulalia simply closed her eyes and smiled. She no longer belonged to this world. Then, as her final breath escaped her lips and her soul departed her body, something extraordinary occurred. The sky, once tinged with red, began to fill with dense clouds. The wind blew fiercely, bringing a sudden cold that made the onlookers huddle in their cloaks. Within minutes, the first snowflakes began to fall gently over Barcelona. The crowd was stunned. Snow. In Barcelona. At the end of winter, when temperatures rarely allowed such a phenomenon, but this was no ordinary snowfall. The flakes seemed whiter than ever, and as they covered Eulalia's lifeless body, they enveloped it like a celestial mantle. For the Christians present, there was no doubt. It was a sign from God, proof that their little martyr had been received into heaven. The soldiers recoiled, uneasy. Dacian, who moments before had seemed unyielding, furrowed his brow, uncomfortable. He was a man of reason, accustomed to dominating fear and death, but in that moment, as the snow fell upon the cross and silenced the entire city, he felt an unease he had never experienced before. Eulalia was dead, but her victory was complete. Chapter 9. The Tomb of a Martyr and the Beginning of Her Veneration. Silence overtook Barcelona. The snow, which had fallen like a white shroud over Eulalia's body, seemed to have frozen time. The crowd remained motionless, some with eyes fixed on the crucified girl, others bowing their heads in whispered prayers. Even the Roman soldiers, accustomed to brutality, appeared uneasy. They had never before witnessed anything like this. But the first to react was Dacian. He clenched his teeth and abruptly rose to his feet. He could not allow that girl, even in death, to continue defying him. His intention had been to make her punishment an example of terror, but now he felt that he was achieving the opposite effect. The expressions on the crowd did not show fear, but something far more dangerous: admiration. "Finish this," he ordered the soldiers in an irritated tone. "Let her body rot here, so that it serves as a warning to all who defy Rome." However, fate had other plans. The secret burial. During the night, while the soldiers kept watch near the cross, a group of Christians planned the unthinkable. They could not allow Eulalia's body to remain exposed to the elements. That girl was not merely a martyr. She was a symbol of resistance, a living testament to the power of faith. They waited for the right moment, when vigilance slackened. Silently, they slipped through the shadows to the site of the ordeal. The wind howled, and the snow covered the ground like a protective mantle. With trembling yet determined hands, they untied the body from the cross and wrapped it in clean linens. It was an act of love and devotion, a final tribute to the girl who had not feared Rome. The tomb was dug in a secret place, out of the reach of the soldiers. There, in the darkness of the earth, Eulalia was laid to rest with the respect she deserved. There were no pompous ceremonies or grandiloquent speeches, only whispered prayers and silent tears, and yet her story was only just beginning. The devotion that Rome could not quell. In time, Eulalia's tomb ceased to be a secret. The persecuted and punished Christians found in it a spiritual refuge. Gradually, her tomb became a place of pilgrimage. The faithful would visit in secret, leaving flowers, lighting candles, and murmuring prayers. It was said that those who prayed fervently at her tomb found solace and miracles. Dacian, however hard he tried to eradicate the memory of the young martyr, failed. Her death did not quench the Christian faith in Barcelona. On the contrary, it strengthened it. Eulalia became a symbol, a banner of resistance. Her story was passed down from generation to generation, and her martyrdom inspired others never to renounce their faith no matter the cost. The passage of the centuries and the Cathedral of Saint Eulalia centuries passed, and Christianity, once persecuted, became the dominant faith of the empire. With the advent of the 9th century, the remains of Saint Eulalia were moved to a more dignified place, a church that would later become the majestic Cathedral of Saint Eulalia in Barcelona. Today, in the heart of the city, her relics rest in the cathedral's crypt, protected by stone and time. The girl who defied Rome is still remembered, venerated as the patroness of Barcelona, her name engraved in the history of the city. Every year, on her feast day, the people of Barcelona paid tribute to her, remembering the sacrifice of the little martyr who, at only 13, defied an empire with the only weapon she possessed, her unyielding faith. Chapter 10. The festivities in her honor. Every year, the city of Barcelona celebrates the Feast of Saint Eulalia, one of the most important religious events in the region. During the month of February, the streets of the Gothic quarter fill with processions, liturgical ceremonies, and cultural celebrations that commemorate the life and martyrdom of the saint. One of the most solemn moments of the festivities is the procession in which the image of Saint Eulalia is carried through the city's streets, a route that recalls her final path before martyrdom. It is also traditional for the lays to make their descent, where several figures representing the saint parade through the city, honoring her memory. But the devotion is not limited to the church. During the celebration, Barcelona comes alive with cultural activities, concerts, theatrical performances, and exhibitions that explore its history and heritage. Thus, Saint Eulalia remains present not only in the religious sphere, but also in the cultural life of the city. Saint Eulalia in culture and art. Beyond her religious veneration, the figure of Saint Eulalia has been represented in art, literature, and popular culture over the centuries. Painters, sculptors, and poets have immortalized her martyrdom in various works, some of which can be found in museums and temples across Europe. In the city, her name echoes in streets, squares, and sculptures that remind people of her sacrifice. The Baixada de Santa Eulalia, where tradition recounts that she was rolled inside the barrel of blades, remains a landmark, and her story is recounted to visitors as part of Barcelona's rich cultural heritage. An example of faith for the modern world. In a rapidly advancing world where beliefs and values are constantly challenged, the story of Saint Eulalia remains a beacon of inspiration. Her courage, determination, and unyielding faith resonate with those seeking strength in adversity. For many, Saint Eulalia is not only a symbol of the past, but also a spiritual guide for the present. Her story reminds us of the importance of staying true to our principles, of resisting injustice, and of finding light amid darkness. Every time a devout person lights a candle in her crypt, every time her name is spoken in prayer, Saint Eulalia lives on, not only in the history of Barcelona, but in the hearts of those who see in her an example of faith, courage, and an unyielding love for God. Prayer to Saint Eulalia. O glorious Saint Eulalia, child martyr of unyielding faith, radiant light in the darkness of oppression. You who defied the power of Rome with the purity of your soul and the strength of your spirit. You who endured suffering with courage and embraced the cross with infinite love, intercede for us before the Lord. Grant us the strength to remain steadfast in our faith, the humility to accept sacrifice, and the courage to never fear proclaiming the truth. May your example guide us in times of adversity, and may your love for God inspire our hearts. Protect those who invoke you with devotion. Watch over the city that proudly bears your name, and let your legacy of holiness never fade. O Saint Eulalia, pure flower of Barcelona, pray for us now and forever. Amen.